Good afternoon. My name is Bob Elias, and as chairman of the Associated Student Speakers Program, I'd like to welcome you to our fourth lecture of the quarter. Today we have with us Erich Segal, whom you all know, you've probably seen the movie, read the book. And what we're going to do, since he's on a very busy schedule, we're going to basically have a question-answer period. We have mics set up on either, well, at least on that side. Yes, we have them on both sides. And anytime you have a question, just hop up, go to the mic, and ask it.
Bear in mind that I'm tremendously hungover. I really am. I warned you about it too when you invited me, right? They said, what are you doing Friday? And I said, I'm going to be hungover one way or the other. And I'm hungover both ways. So I may not be my usual lucid self.
Well, I just wanted to start off by asking you a few questions that I want to know about Love Story.
Sure.
And the first question that comes to my mind is from the first sentence in the book. What do you say about a 25-year-old girl who dies? Something like that. So I was just
Ryan O'Neill's already got the part, so I don't have to audition you.
I was wondering, now, in my mind, there could have been two reasons that you did that, and they're extreme reasons. One is that you wanted to protect yourself from the ending, which you may have
right.
felt...
Okay, good. That is true. In other words, take the sting off the soap opera part. Right.
Right. Or my other one was you would have wanted to go to the other extreme, which may have been to tell people the ending and still prove that you could still get the emotion out of them.
Well, I didn't want to prove anything. That's the truth. And as far as whatever happened to Love Story, it began as a naive effort. I didn't, want to say, oh boy, I'm really going to show them you can give away the end and still go with it. And that wasn't the purpose. It's closer to what you say, which is take the sting off the melodrama at the beginning, and more important, it's consistent with Oliver's character. One of the things you ask in a serious novel course is who's telling the story and why. And if you apply that to Love Story, which I will never pretend is a serious, work of important literature, never. And I never have. You've read, and it's hurt me a lot because I teach the classics, and I know what a classic is. I even know what literature is. I have a PhD to prove it. And I never, ever made these exaggerated claims. Any of you that have seen the television shows that were then reported on, for example, I supposedly compared myself to Euripides. If you saw that television show, it breaks my A because, I have a lot more respect for Euripides than to see him compared with me, even by me. It's an outrage. It's also a misquote. It was taken from 30 seconds, 30 minutes separated part. In any case, nonetheless, speaking in answer to your question, and with having said this again for the nth time and gone on your record as believing that way, who is telling the story of Love Story? It's Oliver. Why is he telling it to you? Well, he wouldn't tell you this story unless he had a damn good reason, because consistent to his character is he loves his wife and he wants to be with her and he doesn't care about anybody else. And the only reason he would talk to you is that he has been traumatized and he wants to talk to somebody because his wife is dead. And that's why.
I see. Well, do you feel that since you have written Love Story and it has become such a tremendous success, do you feel that the proportion of girls one gets goes up proportionally with the number of books sold? Is there a groupie for authors?
Oh, well, that's a better question. Is there a groupie for authors? And by the way, your radio program or whatever asked whether they could record all this, and I said, let's wait and see what the questions are before you play it on the air. I'll be glad to answer any kind of question, and we'll just, if it's unfit for human consumption beyond this, fine, we'll rate it X and burn it, or I don't know. But no, of course there is. And I don't think there are groupies for authors necessarily, but there are groupies for people that go on television, and that there's something about appearing on the screen that gives you a kind of appeal to a certain mentality. Sure, there are groupies. Sure, I get fan letters. Never did anything about it. I've been curious, but never have.
When I went to see the movie, it was an interesting thing. There were some ladies behind me crying in the first 2 minutes, and which was, I guess it was normal because somebody died, but they were crying at the end again.
Yeah. Well, because they'd come, part of the phenomenon of it all is that most people came already conditioned, knowing where they were going to cry, and because they had read the book, and that's absolutely true. I know that's a fact. That ladies came, some people cry in line outside the theater.
Could you go into a little bit? Usually, there's a book, and then the screenplay comes from the book. I think you did it the other way around.
Yeah, and the simplest of all reasons, since there's been so much misinformation printed about how Love Story happened, at the risk of boring you, I'll tell you in as brief as possible way how it really did happen, just to set it all straight. The story in its melodramatic details was told to me by a student, an ex-student of mine, class of '65 from Yale. And just the story of a girl who had supported her husband, and then after he got his degree, it wasn't a law degree, I changed all those details, she died. And I didn't know how to write a novel, or I didn't even think about a novel, because I've always, whatever literary ambitions I cherished were all in the area of dramatic things, like a play or a movie. And so I had written 3 screenplays, and I just sat down and decided to write a screenplay about this thing that had happened to the kid, because I was moved to do it. And the result of that screenplay that I wrote, despite what you read in your national news weeklies, is exactly what was filmed, with the exception of the ending, which they changed. Don't ask me why. And that exact film script was refused. Part of the legend, of course, rags to riches. It was refused by every single studio in this city, with vitriolic notes back to me. Segal, this is unworthy of the author of The Yellow Submarine. I mean, you've lost your touch, your marbles, your this, that, and the other thing. Don't you have any commercial sense? In other words, it wasn't the usual pink slip, thank you but no thank you, or very interesting script and moving characterizations, but not for us at this time, sir. Nothing. It was vitriol. It was vehement rejections, and I had enormous feelings of unworthiness, only because, I don't like to be put down that hard. Little did I know what was in store. So, okay, forget it, except that a friend of mine, Lois Wallace, who's a literary agent, said, look, I like it. It's got something to it. Admittedly, people might want to not spend hundreds of thousands of dollars and make a movie out of it now. Why don't you write it up as a novel, because a novel costs a couple of $100 to print, and at least, she said, I like Ginny and I like Oliver, you can perpetuate them, or put them down forever, at least on paper. So I wrote the novel only because no one would make the movie.
Do you feel that, since you did write both of them, and they're very close to each other, the novel and the book, how much, since Love Story has sold, in the first 3 weeks, I believe the figure was something like it made $11.6 million, which set an all-time record for any movie in history of films. And do you feel that this was brought on by the book? How do you think it would have done if it would have been released?
Sure. Oh, absolutely. No question, because more people read Love Story than had read any other book. That is an obvious relation, because so many millions of people had bought and read the book in its various forms, whether it was in the Ladies' Home Journal in February of 1970, or the Literary Guild sold almost 1 million copies, and the paperback had sold about 7 million by the time the movie came out. You had all those people queuing up to go and see it. I think that's an absolute one-to-one relation.
Could you get up and go to the mic so everybody could hear your question?
I mean, what's curious is, and here's a phenomenon, even people that hated the book went to the movies to hate it too. One of my friends, the guy I run with back in New Haven, who catches a lot of flack for me and doesn't tell me about a lot of it, but he's got a lab partner, a girl, very intellectual. She said, "You tell your friend Segal that I hated his book and I hated his movie." And he said, "If you hated his book so much, why'd you see his movie?" And she shut up, in a sense, because, she admitted that, there was a certain fascination to her hatred, even.
Well, I find that true also. Like, for example,
You shut
every day I read the comics, and there's a lot of them that I like, but every day I read one I hate, Nancy. I don't know why. I keep reading it. I want to see how bad it is. It's like this guy, it's like this Bushmiller, the guy who draws it, it's like rigor mortis set in on his mind. But he's turning it out. His hand is writing on it's garbage. Yes, could you?
Yes, there was a change in the ending between the book and the
Could you
movie.
speak up? It's really hard to hear.
The mic doesn't work. You want to know about the ending change?
Why did they change it in the movie?
I don't know why they changed the ending in the movie. It's one of those things I can't explain to you, and I'm sure if they had it to do over again, because there'd never been a movie where people came having read the book and wanting to see every single thing the way it was in the book, and really rebelling when they didn't see what was exactly in the book. I have no idea why.
Could we take the next question over here?
Sure. I just want to propose something. I was just wondering what your idea would be. Do you think that the film would have had the same impact if, say, instead of centering around two ruling class people, going to a big preppy school, with a lot of money, if the main characters had been a black couple living in a ghetto, and
No.
she had 3 illegitimate children, and but she was going around with him, and she really loved him. They really loved each other, and then she got pregnant again. But before she had the baby, she died of leukemia.
Why don't you write it? That sounds good.
I think the answer to it is, and one of the things that love story is that people don't want to recognize, is it's a fantasy. It's a fantasy.
What type of fantasies? I mean, like, what class would it come from?
Beg pardon?
What class would it come from? Like, I mean, fantasies come from different classes. Like, a revolutionary might fantasize about revolution, and, a black guy might fantasize about, a revolution, or,
No, it's a romantic fantasy. It's a romantic fantasy.
Well-
But I emphasize that part of its appeal, and it's not deliberate on my part, among the many brickbats thrown at me, is that I'm in the employ of the Nixon administration to promulgate under the guise of a novel all the values of the Middle America.
That's right.
That's right. Thank you.
I was just wondering if the Vietnamese could afford love stories like that, or if they could actually get it on when the napalm's
I don't know.
dropping.
I'll tell you something. You got to realize something, that it is true. It is true that I accept, for example, what Gary Arnold said in his very vehement put down of the movie in the Washington Post, saying this is pouring reactionary oil on troubled waters and all that kind of business. It is absolutely true that that the effect of Love Story was tranquilizing, and on the social consciences of America, and it's disquieting to me, only because I never expected any kind of audience whatsoever. Remember, this was originally a script written, like as a fantasy that I just submitted to be a movie, and nobody liked it. So I said, okay, they hate it. So how could I conceive of going the total pendulum route from total rejection to universal, if not acceptance, exposure? How could I imagine the kind of audience that I got and have any effect on anybody except maybe my family that would be proud to see me have a book printed of whatever sort? There are a lot of well-intentioned books that don't get noticed at all. Now, I had no intention whatsoever in writing this. It was a totally, it was a reflex action.
Are you saying that when you said it had like the tranquilizing effect, that would kind of be like acting, like I guess on the middle class people it would have a tranquilizing effect like heroin does on people in the ghetto, stuff like that?
However whatever kind of tranquilizer you want. I mean, yeah.
And do you really, just one last question, do you really think that people have to see a movie to hate it?
Yeah, I think they owe that to be honest. If you want to hate something, you gotta.
Well, we don't have
Well,
to
that's a little bit intellectually dishonest, if I may say so. I mean, okay, well,
We'll-
you're entitled to your opinion, which is, I think, more than you're willing to grant me.
Well, she may be right. Like we don't have to see her to
We're
hate
here
her.
to exchange ideas, not bludgeon ourselves over the head with them.
Could we go over there, please?
Yes, I am teaching Italian here, and also in Italian, so I'm particularly interested in this point. Why did you choose an Italian girl for this? Some people say it was a clean counterpart to The Godfather. Is that the reason?
I don't really know. I just don't know. I've read all kinds of sociological interpretations, and I can't explain it, except that I knew a girl like this, and she was Italian, and I used her name almost well, changing a few letters, and that's why I never thought. I mean, I never thought I would be subjected to this kind of analysis. Not at all. What? That, again, I didn't have anything to do with that.
Well, let's go on with the questions. We have one over here.
I'm interested to know how someone can be an assistant professor of classics at Yale University with a heavy teaching load, and then, I presume, heavy publishing demands, too, to reach tenure, if I understand UCLA, and then still be fairly successful in writing scripts and writing books. I don't ask this question with any antagonism. I suppose many assistant professors here would like to know how you do it, too.
Well, here's the thing. It's a very simple answer, and it goes as much for love stories, for the Yellow Submarine, or any of the other things. You have to grant that any kind of professor, old or young, can have a hobby. And strange as it may sound, this kind of writing was, and I hope it will remain a hobby with me. It's just that it's a hobby that got out of hand, and that's why, I mean, I'm literally renouncing every kind of thing that could remotely be connected with pop literature or pop phenomena to return to totally academic pursuits. Now, you know that I was not anxious even to come and present myself on whatever topic remotely related to love story, merely because I would rather return to the library, which is what is important for me in life.
Well, I find that interesting, that you have here, I guess, there are people who don't like it. Maybe there are quite a few people who don't like it, but there are certainly more people. There's millions of people that love the book and they love the movie. And as far as going to see something you hate, there may be some of those, but I think most of the people go there and they enjoy it. And it's interesting to find that you spend time apologizing for success. And I certainly wouldn't do that, and I wish I wrote it. I mean, as far as the money goes and the success.
But everyone says that to me, but it doesn't make my life any easier, because you are where your head is, and not anything else, not what your headline is. And I'm a teacher of classics. I was until this happened. And what I really want to do is go back and do what I used to do. Now, maybe it's impossible when you have this kind of success, but I'm unhappy doing anything else. And to be as successful as I am and as unhappy as I am, it's kind of it's not a pleasant thing to consider.
Could we have a question from there, please?
Yeah. Do you think love story will be a spearhead for the new trend of romanticism in film?
I don't know. I doubt it. I think love story is a one-shot. It's an absolute one-shot. I don't think it indicates any trend whatsoever.
Okay, could we go over here, please?
Yeah, I saw a lot of reviews of the thing, both the movie and the book.
Could you please speak up? It's very difficult.
I saw a lot of reviews of both, the movie and the book, and all sorts of places, and I noticed that almost all of them seemed to say very little about the book or the movie and a great deal about you.
Yeah.
Why?
Boy, let me tell you something. That's what really turned my whole life around, starting about December. I'll grant you that one of the reasons was that I just proved to be particularly obnoxious on television to movie reviewers. Whether they, in fact, would like to visit with Johnny Carson and envied me that, it's not so great. They could have it. They can now. Whatever it was, I seemed to rub all those guys the wrong way. The only decent review, when I say review, I mean, we're talking about negative reviews, the only review that I thought was really unpersonally motivated, which was, truly critical and objective, was, say, Pauline Kael's very lengthy put down in the New Yorker. And I wrote her a letter and I said, Pauline, I thought, all your points were well taken. I'm sorry you didn't like it, but at least, I didn't feel personally attacked. And she wrote me back a letter and said, good, because I didn't want to hurt your feelings. You have nothing to do with the movie I'm criticizing. I'm criticizing the movie and not you. But I became conspicuous. Maybe I went on television too often. It was fun. It was fun, so I did it. And it started to rub people the wrong way.
From what I just want to comment on what you said. From what you say, is it then that when you're writing and you make a statement like, let's say, being in love means not having to say you're sorry. Now, would that be the character speaking? Like, there are many authors who would say, well, don't look at me, he said it. And there are authors who would claim to be speaking for themselves through their character. Now,
love means never having to say you're sorry. It was a line of dialogue, not a piece of philosophy. It doesn't, maybe it doesn't work for any other context, but people like topics of conversation, and so they made that a topic of conversation. But I didn't mean it to be anything more than a line of dialogue, and just became something more.
I see. Okay, we have a question, I believe, over there.
Mr. Segal, you used to be a marvelous teacher. Has anything changed since you became famous?
Yeah. Thank you yeah, it's much more difficult for me to teach now, except very small classes, because I cannot, I've had a very bad press. I'd like to think that my students at Yale were sophisticated enough to distinguish between what they read about in Time magazine and what they see in the classroom, but this is really not so. The enormous amount of bad press I have had has caused not a small amount of alienation between myself and my students. I can't teach the way I used to teach, and except in very small classes, so I'm not going to teach at all next year. Not that I want to, but it becomes a fantastic battle every time I get into the classroom, and that's too much. And so I'm going to, hopefully, I'm going to court obscurity, and maybe I'll find it.
Could we take a question here?
Yeah, I'm impressed by your defense that you put up, and I'd like to believe it's an honest one.
It is.
But we all know that when women go to see Love Story, they don't bring handkerchiefs, they bring sheets. What I want to know is, we say that people, as the narrator has mentioned, enjoy Love Story, and I'm sure they do, because I feel they're being highly manipulated. And what I want to know is, in your intention of writing the book or the script, were you aware of the manipulation that took place?
I'm only aware of one thing in writing Love Story, and this may seem silly, but I hope you notice that I'm not hedging my answers, and I'm telling you the truth. I wrote that thing, and the first guy to cry was me. I don't understand. People say, why do people cry? Even the negative reviewers admit, damn it, I cried, but it's still a dishonest work, etc. And that, it may be valid. Damn it, I cried, and I don't understand why. I don't understand why. I wrote it. I cried. She died. I don't understand it. If I manipulated people, the first person I manipulated was myself. And I'm guilty of auto-manipulation, I guess. I mean, this is really true. I don't understand it. I really don't understand it. And I really do, but I mean, I do understand the antagonism of people who, against their will, find themselves manipulated is an uncomplimentary verb, moved perhaps as an overly complimentary verb, but somewhere in between, who find things aroused in them that they would just as soon not have aroused in them.
We'll take the question here. Could you please go to the mic and you can, yes, go ahead.
When you wrote The Yellow Submarine, did you foresee the breakup of the Beatles?
Yes. Did you all hear the question? When I wrote The Yellow Submarine, did I foresee the breakup of the Beatles? It was pretty obvious then because, I mean, I saw 1967 when I was in London writing it. They were together like I'd never seen people be together. If George Harrison would stub his toe, Ringo Starr would say, ouch. If you know what I mean, they were four guys that were just absolutely together. By 1968, when I went over there again for the opening of the film, well, everything you've read about is true. I don't want to be a gossiper or anything like that. I mean, but you know, there were certain divisive elements, personalities that arrived upon the scene that suggested more independence for certain people, and yeah, I saw it. It was pretty clear.
Yes.
You said that you thought Love Story was a one-shot deal, really, that it was a lucky thing for you, but and also that you were maybe that the audience was being manipulated. But I don't understand why nobody seems to realize that you can't be manipulated unless there's a reason. There must be a cause. So the audience evidently wants to be manipulated. And if that is true, why would this be a one-shot deal? It is very possible that the public really wanted a change from all this surfeit.
Yeah, it's possible, but
they say it is. That maybe this is a new trend.
I don't know, but let's watch the trend and see, you know, one swallow doth not a summer make, or whatever that cliche is. And I don't know, you know, this is just it's a one shot. Let's see what the next trend film is. Or, you know, let's see if there is another film like this or remotely like this that comes along.
Would you comment, please, on what you think of the trend of movies, the way they have been going, and whether you think that the romanticism of Love Story is much more valid in your mind than the average story that is put out? Would you give us a little rundown on what your likes?
Well, first of all, I don't discern a trend in movies. Trends are hard to discern, especially since you got to realize that movies are initiated 2 years before they actually come out. You know, so by the time, if someone conceived of a romantic movie today, we could be into cynical movies in 2 years when that movie comes out. I just have absolutely no idea. I don't think it would be valid to try another thing like Love Story. It's in a way a throwback in so many ways. One of my friends said to me, "My God, this is a story right out of the 40s." I said, "Oh, the 1940s?" He said, "No, the 1740s." It's true. I mean, you know, once in a while you have there are analogs to this, and I mean this. Please understand me when I say I don't mean to compare myself to Goethe, but Goethe wrote something called The Sorrows of Young Werther, and I'm sorry. It's a weeper. And it's so overly romantic, it's ridiculous, but it came at a time, 1774, if I remember correctly, and it just made all of Europe cry. All of Europe cry, in much the same way Love Story is doing, and no one could really understand why. There are periods in English literature, for example, 95 and after, when the Restoration drama When Restoration drama, which was the absolute apogee of cynicism in English literature, there's never been a more cynical period than that of Restoration comedy. And around the 1790s, late 1790s, it blended into Colley Cibber and the most sentimental, weepy cry literature that ever has been in the history of English letters. Richardson and all that kind of stuff. Really, so maybe it is a valid trend. Maybe there will be. Maybe it is a point where we're passing from cynicism into the kind of sentimentality for which there is a precedent even in English letters. But let's step back and see. I'm not a prophet, that's for sure. I certainly can't tell.
You mean you're not planning a sequel called Return to the Planet of Love Story?
No.
Yes.
Mr. Segal, as a intellectual, I suppose, and a PhD professor, you have to make a sort of personal analysis of what the mentality is and what the average intellect is of the person who read Love Story and who became an avid fan of yours and who was almost a rabid defender of your type, the style of the story and the style of the movie. How do you assess this person's intellect as compared to the college level and say your own?
I dig, okay. I'll tell you a paradoxical thing. My two greatest and most passionate groups of fans polarize themselves between university professors above the level of associate professor and children under the age of 10. I'm not kidding you, that's not a put on, because I get the letters. Children under the age of 10 with no literary preconceptions, or professors over the age of tenure who, I just made that up. I don't come prepared with notes or anything, who know all the literary pretensions in the world and realize that I don't take myself seriously or meant for Love Story to be taken seriously, and yet I will say something that, I mean, it is written with a kind of, if I may say, a kind of expertise on whatever level you want to look. I mean, it's written in the English language, in clear English, oversimplified, deliberately so. And these professors like the oversimplification. I know this because, as you might have noticed, I'm ever so slightly paranoid about the whole matter. And I was not anxious to go, as I did 2 weeks ago, to address on a panel that I was supposed to be on for weeks and weeks, the year before, at the American Comparative Literature Association. Matter of fact, it was chaired, my particular symposium was chaired by Professor Adams of UCLA. And I said, oh no, I mean, so I've been getting it from, certain learned quarters already. Well, I'm going to get killed by these professors. And on the contrary, I mean, of course, the symposium was on something very heavy and cerebral, but in the convivialities that followed, all the professors said, cool, nice little thing you did in Love Story. I mean, you had an aim, you set out to do it, you did it, cool, next case. And that's where that's where the polarities of admirers are. They group under the age of 10 and among the extremely genuinely literary sophisticates. How long have we been going? No, we can go. Just,
Okay, let's take the next question.
You talked about Pauline Kael and how you felt her review lacked personal vehement.
Yeah.
I wanted to know, waiting to ask you your opinion of, without you getting personal, about the criticism abilities or the objectivity or lack of emotion on the part of John Simon, a critic who I sometimes feel gets very, very unduly and unnecessarily bitter. How do you feel about his review of Love Story and the way he treated you on the Dick Cavett show?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a guy, there's a very venomous individual who will let his bile get in the way of his brain. I mean it sincerely. I mean it sincerely. I mean, the point is that he is a man who's really a traitor to his intellect, which is considerable, and his learning, which is formidable. And it's very sad to see this guy go on a very strange ego trip in which he'd prefer to be a performer. I mean, he's nothing more than a clown with a PhD when he goes on television, because he deliberately takes these outrageous stances to be, you know, a kind of performer. He's a man with incredible intellectual capacity, and he's really wasting his talents, and a very, very sad thing to see.
I'm sorry, I didn't see you standing there.
I find it very funny in a time when there's so much turmoil that everything has to be so damn relevant. So that I have to agree when you said the story was kind of a fantasy, and because it was a screenplay, it wasn't going to be long, because that was essentially a screenplay in a book. But can you explain to me, because I think you're getting criticized for a beautiful story when they're saying it isn't relevant. Because we have black problems in America, then every film we make has to be on black problems in America. And then I also wonder, do you have to have a relevant reason to cry? Can't you just cry because you emotionally feel like crying? Does it have to be because two people, you know, and it's really ridiculous. I think we're all afraid of crying. I think some people cry because the girlfriend leaves them. Is that a relevant reason? Yeah.
Listen, I agree with you, and I thank you. And it occurs to me that I once had a very spooky thing happened to me a couple of weeks ago, only because I said the same thing that a highly respected, intellectual, relevant novelist then said on the very same topic within a 24-hour period. Forget about what I said, but I spoke at Harvard a couple of weeks ago with Kurt Vonnegut Jr. Now, I think no one will doubt that Kurt Vonnegut Jr. writes bitingly about heavy issues and is a relevant writer. And we were kidding around a little bit, and then he finally, I mean, you know, kind of mutual put-downs and stuff, but Vonnegut said, he said, in all seriousness, he said, I cannot understand why all these people are getting critically and intellectually upset by Love Story, because to criticize Love Story, I now quote Kurt Vonnegut, is like criticizing a chocolate eclair. And it was the Literary Society at Harvard, so they all clapped. And he said, "Guys, I hope you understand what I meant, Vonnegut." And that's exactly what I say. I mean, you know, does every chocolate eclair have to be a fortune cookie with a message that says "Free Angela Davis"? Does it? Now, does it? Maybe you think so. Maybe I'm wrong, but there are some aspects of life, I mean, that have to do not with the intellect, not even with one's inherent sense of morality. I mean, is vitamin C a political issue? And I mean, all I'm saying is, now you're looking at someone who has done more than his share for the right political causes, and who never wanted what he wrote even to be an instrument for a minute of the administration's values being reinforced. But nonetheless, I don't think Love Story is a political thing. It's a chocolate eclair, and it should be treated as a chocolate eclair. Or I mean, there's bitter chocolate and there's sweet chocolate and there's or oatmeal, or pudding, or whatever, you know, is beyond the realm of, it's either you like it and you swallow it, or it's lousy and you spit it out. But it shouldn't become an intellectual issue.
Yeah, it comes to my mind that, you know, in a society where we've come to the point where we've decided that things are bad and we should hate things that are bad, it seems that we're hating all things, and some of them are good. And that's what I think about your story. I think like what you said, I think they over-intellectualized a nice chocolate eclair. And, and we don't really have to hate everything. Even things that are nice, sometimes we can like. There's nothing wrong with that. We don't have to hate everything that's quote-unquote establishment. And I think your movie is an example of the anti-establishment saying, this is an establishment movie, and because I'm anti-establishment, I can't accept that, And it's kind of taking roles, if you're anti-establishment, there's nothing wrong with love. That's okay. Just because that was establishment for all those years is okay with me as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you.
Okay. We have a question here.
Yes, Mr. Segal. I've seen religious people cry at Joan of Arc, and I've seen socialist people cry at movies that show how the Nazis treated people. And I think that the reason people normally cry is that their sense of righteousness or justice is violated by whatever they see. And I think that you actually realize that what happened was that the people's sense of romantic justice was violated. Now, with respect to this chocolate eclair, I look upon this sort of as a dentist sometimes. Chocolate eclairs are good to a certain extent, but beyond a certain extent, there's more cavities than health comes out of it.
That's right.
Now, I didn't see
I only made one chocolate eclair.
Right. I didn't see Love Story myself, so I don't want to say whether it's good or bad. But I have this feeling on the side that it may have, that the reaction may have been somewhat justified or unjustified due to people's feeling that a greater percentage of the population is going to be more interested in romanticism than reality. It seems to me that, for instance, in China, the people there, as I've talked to several British people who have been there, have no concept of romanticism as it's known in the Western world. They have no movies dealing with romanticism. And I look upon it as one of the things which has caused a lot of failings for people to deal with reality.
I'll tell you something. I take an intellectually extreme position. I don't think there's really been. There's been arguments on both sides here, but I really think there's never been a work of literature that actually has caused a violent social movement as a work of literature. I'm not talking about art. Whether that book is Das Kapital or Mein Kampf or Chairman Mao's Red Book, I just don't think that works in and of themselves either turn on or turn off social movements. I really don't. And I don't think that Love Story or any other kind of establishment, if you will, I'll accept that term, movie is going to be an opiate any more than I believe you can make a disturbing movie and get it seen by the people that it should disturb and spur them to any kind of social action. Perfect example of that category is Z. I mean, did it really get people to do things en masse when you consider how many people saw Z about the political regime in Greece? And that was definitely a politicizing movie.
Yes, over here.
A lot of the criticisms I've had of literature classes have been that things are overanalyzed and overinterpreted. Since you found this happening to your book, are you going to change your teaching style at all?
No, change my writing style maybe. No, it's scary. I'm waiting for the question because it's popping up more and more now, but I'll be glad to ask it myself before it comes, which is there's a whole religious allegory interpretation of Love Story that absolutely fragments my mind. Because, really, the analogs are just unbelievable, unintentional. But JC, Jenny Cavallari, Jesus Christ, no kidding. Calvary, the Father and the Son reunited at the end, the death. I tell you, this is serious. I mean, I've received letters about this, questions at literary symposia about people who are ostensibly in their right minds finding this kind of interpretation. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. I spoke to someone today who put forth this theory and who was otherwise rational. Let me give you an analogy of, and perhaps it will indicate more than anything what this does to me personally. When I was writing The Yellow Submarine, a couple of my students at Yale, at least because I live right at Ezra Stiles College, right on the campus, knew that I was commuting now and then between classes, and I would see the Beatles. And Sgt. Pepper had just come out, and they came up to me with a list of questions. They said, "Ask John Lennon what these words mean," you know, and I forget, for the benefit of Mr. whatever that song is, you know, dancing bears and the horse, whatever that stuff. So I had a list of questions of interpretation, you know, of literary interpretation to pose to John Lennon. And at a very relaxed, I thought, moment, I took out my little list, and I said to John, and who he had been up to this point very friendly, and I said, "John, I got a few questions to ask you from my students." And he said, "Yeah?" And I said, "What is the hidden significance of these lines?" And he said, and he shrieked, he said, "Don't do that to me!" And he turned around, and he really lost his temper, and I said, "What have I done?" And I said, "What's the matter?" And he said, "I cannot stand it." He said, "They don't mean anything." He said, "We just wrote them. We just wrote them. They don't mean anything." And he said, "I can't stand when we are interpreted like that. And you tell your students that I can't stand it." And I told my students that, and they said, "Yeah, but what do they really mean?" And I knew, because I'm a bad actor, but I mean, when I tell you that John Lennon really reacted vehemently, you know, it was just a friendly conversation. It wasn't in front of anybody. It was just, you know, the Beatles at a recording session and at the EMI in St. John's Wood, and myself, and, you know, it wasn't for anybody's benefit that this display of real rage, it wasn't rage as much as anguish. He said, "Don't ask me those questions." In a way, on a lesser scale, that's what I see happening to me. I mean, you know, I want to scream out like John Lennon and say, "Dad, you know, I just did it."
Well, in view of that, as a professor yourself, where do you draw the line in interpreting other people's works? Like, I've been in many classes here in UCLA where, for example, Steinbeck's Flight, you know, the dagger is a phallic symbol and his brother is a horse, or, you know, and just, if a guy really, if
You know what Sigmund Freud said about phallic symbols, don't you? He said, sometimes, you know, a cigar is only a cigar. Sigmund, he said that.
So aren't professors really guilty of reading things? Even Goethe, you know, every line has a hidden meaning in Goethe and Faust, let's say. Do you think these authors, as great as they are, Faulkner, Hemingway, that they really meant half of these things even?
Oh no, I mean, but it makes employment for professors in a sense that whole new theories and stuff like that. I can't contrast my own, you know, analysis of texts to. I hope I don't go too far. You know, I deal with themes and images which I think are valid in a given text, and what a poet is doing, and you know, it's hard to describe what I do except that, you know, just I do it and I try not to go too far. And who knows what going too far is? Who knows what the artist himself would say if he were alive to?
Let's take 2 or 3 more questions right over here.
Professor Segal, I've read that you are preparing or have prepared a book on the drama, and I'd like to ask what the scope of that book is and what ideas that you propose to have in
that book, well, I've written a couple of books already, mostly about ancient comedy. A book on Plautus, the Roman comic playwright. What I'm writing now is a book called, a bit dramatically, maybe melodramatically, titled The Death of Comedy. And what it really is, it's a contrast on sort of a complet basis of the comedy of Aristophanes, which is, I maintain, comedy as in its most untrammeled and purest form, with the comedy of almost the anti-comedians of our own age, like Ionesco and Beckett. In other words, it's looking, for example, at Beckett in the context of Aristophanes, which is to say, he takes all the Aristophanic tricks and he turns them upside down, and they're anti-comic. I do an injustice to my own argument if I kind of summarize it, except to say that it's a contrast between ancient and modern comedy. And it doesn't argue, as the title might suggest, that comedy is dead, but it follows the life cycle of comedy, which can and does repeat itself.
In other words, I guess you could say works of Beckett, tragedy is comedy, or
I wouldn't say. I mean, you know, that's.
Well,
I don't want to do myself an injustice by, you know, summarizing a summary and synthesizing a synthesis.
Well, Beckett, you know, I guess, would you say it's comedy impasse, or?
I mean, I think it's the ne plus ultra of comedy. He takes all the comic devices and puts them in limbo, literally limbo. And in Beckett, waiting for Godot could be waiting for a laugh, in a way. Yet all the apparatus is there, and it just doesn't happen.
Okay, do we have a question over here?
Right. In your dialogue in the book between the two characters and everything, the words seem very appropriate for the characters. And I was just wondering if you had any problems with, like, the vocabulary used, or just if it was natural, it just worked out when you
I just wrote it down. You should hear the questions they ask me in uncollegiate circles about that dialogue. Do young people really talk that way? Or really, was it necessary to profane the King's English? Don't you know that four-letter word shows the bankruptcy of the mind, Professor Segal? You, a professor of literature, contributing to its debasement with these words, teaching our children these words. And I merely reply, I don't have to teach your children these words. They taught them to me. I don't know what to say to these people. One irate parent wrote a letter to me and said, "Love story is composed of nothing but words that you got from bathroom walls." And I wrote back, usually I don't answer that because, you know, so many, but I was really angry at this one. I wrote back and I said, "Dear sir, when's the last time you saw implicit analog on a bathroom wall?" Never received an answer.
Let's take these two questions here, and that's it.
Yeah, I like to comment upon your statement that films or literature as such do not have, say, they do not constitute a movement. I grant you that, but say, they do affect some movements, like, say, take, for example, I won't comment, I will refrain myself to films, like Triumph for the Will. And recently, Battle of Algiers, I think, is a good example of, you know, like what's going to happen in different countries, you know, at the early period. I mean, they give you some sort of action and a method to follow. And also, I would like to say now, I saw Love Story, I liked it at a certain level, I enjoyed it because it was nice and smooth. But I could think of it like I could go way, way back to the films we are making in India and so on, all over the, you know, like films which the dialogue just makes you weep, and there is, what you call, they are the escapist trend. I mean, you know, thousands of people see it, and, you know, this rich man and the, you know, poor girl love story. And like I thought, you know, they are coming back to where we are trying to get off. You see, that's what I felt about Love Story as a social, I mean. But I agree with you, maybe if you take it off, that it is not a social comment, I could enjoy it. But if you say that films do not, that they have no effect, as you said, I can see a period, I mean, I don't say exactly that there's going to be a trend, but 2 or 3, 4 films, the industry might do it just to get on this wavelength.
Yeah, there's one problem, though, with using films as propaganda, and I use that word without any loaded purpose, is that films are no longer really the mass medium. I mean, you can almost one does have a profile of the political leanings, the social thought of people who go out to the theaters now. And very few people who went to see Z, for example, and there were many, had kindly thoughts to the Greek regime in the first place. And the people who in fact approved of the military government of Greece are probably the people that don't go to the movies in the first place. So movies as a social force, until they get on TV, don't have the wide efficacy that I would hope they could have. I'm not against film as a social force. I'm not against anything as a social force. But I just, would like to distinguish between real social forces, which is, say Walter Cronkite on the news. What he says or doesn't say is far more potent than what Z says or doesn't say.
No, I'm also thinking of movies not only just as a medium of, say, television.
I'm thinking of the whole aspect. I mean, the amount of market it has. A movie, say, made in America, it has a world market. You know, I'm taking in context of that. And say, I'm thinking of, say, like Z, I can understand with you, people have been antagonistic towards the Greek regime, and it didn't do much. And it can't do much in a country which is very totalitarian. But say, think of the Battle of Algiers, where it's much more of a, where we are sort of, like, you get the both sides of the view, the French and the people who are fighting for...
I couldn't agree with you more, except that I'd be less idealistic about the force for social change or political change of films, because the people that see movies in every country are the people that need least to be convinced.
Let's have our final question, please.
I'd like to start by saying that just from seeing you here and everything, I like you and I feel sorry for you because of the situation you're in. But I'd also like to tell you what my reaction was to your book. And it was, well, you compared your book before to The Sorrows of Young Werther. That is the reaction of it. And the reaction of The Sorrows of Young Werther, a lot of it was suicide. And
I know.
It really made me feel like, your book made me feel like committing suicide in a way, because I'm not against love or anything, but it was the way that it was, the social context that it was brought into and everything, just seemed like a revision to the 1950s, or going back to the 50s or something like that. And the fact that it was so well received and everything indicated to me that that's where the heads of the U.S. people were at.
You know, that's absolutely true. I mean, look, I'm a child, no longer a child, but when I was a child of the 50s. And when I wrote about the only thing I knew anything about, which was the childhood of the 50s. And with no other thought in my head. But I think that's really the ultimate answer to the effect of Love Story. Love Story could have remained in its first printing of 6,000 copies when it first was published. But the mere fact that so many people wanted to read it, perhaps for diverse reasons, indicates something that has to do more with the pathology, if you will, of the American people than with the pathology of the poor bastard who wrote the thing. Anyway, that's as good a note as any to end on. I thank you for listening. You don't have to go away even liking me anymore, but I like you very much for hearing me out. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Segal.